Hi, welcome to the ZP FoodSense webinar. So we like to do this webinar once a week, and it's really just answering technical questions that have come in during the week. So this week, actually, it's probably worth just saying that anyone who is actually a customer gets personal online training. So we've been doing personal online training recently with clients in China and in South Korea, for example. We do weekly webinars, so if somebody has a technical question, we will cover them in webinars. Now, I was going to cover some data that was coming in from South Korea, but there we've actually decided to bring the samples in, test those samples, and actually write reports on it. So I won't be covering any material that was otherwise going to come in from South Korea this week. But we do monthly webinars as well, where we do talk about, or we do live demonstrations. I will do a live demonstration today as well. But we do the monthly webinars, and we do a lot of more of a deep dive into the technology and into the and also the webinars are much more thorough. Sorry, not webinars. The demonstrations are a lot more thorough as well. Just to say, actually, we're not that far off doing our next FoodSense Gen 4 webinars. We have them on the 1st of August. We do two. We do one in our morning and one in, I say, our afternoon. I'm sort of thinking about London time zone here. The morning is good because it does cover people. It starts with Australia, basically. You know, we can sort of do people in that part of the hemisphere, not hemisphere, but part of the globe. And we do one in the afternoon because that does help with the North America, South America, Central America clients. So we do comprehensive webinars once a month. Now the question this week is because this is really coming in from a potential reseller slash distributor. Probably reseller, and they want to know what the standard method that we use for let's say validating the FoodSense Generation 4. I suppose I haven't even mentioned the FoodSense Generation 4 actually even once here. So I do have a FoodSense Generation 4 in front of me. In fact, these are some of the chili sensors here. I'm not going to do a comprehensive live streaming or live demo today, in fact, or demo today. But I will run a quick sample later on. So they want to know what our standard reference method for this instrument was, and we used HPLC, high performance liquid chromatography. I almost want to say high pressure liquid chromatography because when I was doing HPLC, it was definitely called high pressure liquid chromatography, but these days the industry seems to have changed to high performance liquid chromatography. Using the AOAC method 995.03. I will talk about that today. So that was one of their questions. Yeah, because in fact what's happening here is that their potential client is already using HPLC AOAC method. Just out of interest, anyone who's interested in the FoodSense Generation 4, this is that device here. Sometimes previous models were called the chili pot. Colloquially, it gets called online the Scoville meter. Anyone who's interested in this knows that there's a problem with HPLC. Why, let's say you're a reseller and somebody contacts you and says, oh, I'm interested in the chili pot or the FoodSense or the Scoville meter. They all refer to this instrument. I'm sorry about that confusion. It's just we're actually on Generation 4, which is something I do discuss in the webinar. Why are they interested in this if the HPLC is quite so good? And there's actually a problem with HPLC. And so we're not let's say HPLC has problems. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a market for this. I know one thing. We ship many more FoodSense Generation 4s than there are HPLCs being sold for doing chili detection. We are selling a lot of these instruments, so there's a real problem, let's say, in the HPLC. You don't have to calibrate this instrument. When you'll see shortly, in fact, that this instrument's great because this instrument, you don't have to calibrate it. It's all solid state. In fact, the sensors are, when we're manufacturing the sensors in the factory, we make sure that they're within specification. The device itself is very solid state. If somebody gets it dirty, I can take it apart. I'll put it back together again now. There's no pumps, there's no valves, there's nothing like that. There's no organic solvents that clicks in like that. So this is a very easy to use little instrument. People can check it using, let's say, known standards, which once they're a client, then we'll talk to them about that. They ask you for a brochure. I mean, to be honest with you, ZP, we've been around now for 10 years. When we came along, it was all digital marketing. It sounds ridiculous, but we have websites, we have videos, we have weekly webinars like this, but we don't have a brochure for this. Why? Because brochures are kind of, come from the days when, in fact, products like FoodSense, pre-internet, you may have a brochure, let's say. We do actually have, very good literature on this. In fact, I might just share my my other screen with you for a second. When I say we have very good literature, this is the manual that comes with it. Talks about what's in the box, talks about tests, tools needed, disclaimers, where to get the app from, how to turn the instrument on, how to start a chili assay, let's say, how to make Bluetooth connection, how to do settings, how to add sample, what you can expect when it's running, and also the status of the instrument. So we do have very good, let's say, real world literature on this. It's in the form of the manual. The manual is only something that ships with the device. Otherwise, you get lots of people asking for manuals, but they've no intention of actually buying the device at all. So we don't have a brochure for it, but I mean, we do have a very comprehensive website. If you ask a technical question, you'll get a technical response back, which is what this webinar is about today. So we're much more digital than that. It's probably worth saying that when answering the question, how do we compare against, let's say, traditional HPLC AOAC 195.03 methods, I want to show you a couple of papers. There's a guy called Charlie Rower at the University of Minnesota. If you see this link will be underneath the YouTube video when I put this up on YouTube. This link will take you to this page. This page will take you to these papers. So Charlie Rower is not sponsored by ZP. He just bought the unit independently of Zimmer and Peacock, and actually he did his own validation. And not only did he do it in 2020, he actually did it again a couple of years later. And I still didn't know about the. So in fact, this paper was only a year ago. I still didn't know that he was doing this, but in fact, he uses this instrument, and then he also helps farmers. I think it's probably growers, I should say, in the USA. And he sends the samples out for HPLC, and he also sends the samples on. He also does the samples himself, and he prefers this instrument. And I think he says it's because it's fast, it's lower cost. His biggest problem with HPLC, and this will be something today, is an HPLC test in the USA. The cheap, mind you, that you can do it is like $50. Realistically, in I think in USA and most of Europe, it's more like it's well north of 100 euros. I believe that there are places in India where you can get it for 25 euros or $25. But I think you sometimes pay for what you pay the price, let's say. Now, the reason I bring that up is Charlie, actually, when he does testing, he does it in triplicate. He would like to do it in triplicate on HPLC because Charlie understands that most chili samples are heterogeneous. Now by that statement, heterogeneous, let me just grab something like this. When you look at these chili flakes, you can quite clearly see. I chose this because it was big. The pieces are big enough. You can quite clearly see that it's not a homogeneous product. So Charlie understands that, in fact, you can have a chili powder or even a fresh chili. Charlie does most of his work on actually fresh chilies. The capsaicin in these products is not evenly distributed. It means that in order to really understand, I'm sorry, just reaching up for something, which is more like a puree. In order to understand the capsaicin in a heterogeneous product like this, you really need to do several samples and several tests. Nobody does it in the HPLC world because it's too expensive to do. So one of the benefits that he sees from the instrument that we have is actually you can do more testing. he would like to do it on HPLC, but he can't afford to do it. If he did 3 tests in where he is in his part of the world, it would cost him $300. You almost, $300 is ridiculous. No, it's not ridiculous. It's just the way the market works. So the problem with HPLC is, and I will talk about, well, so A, you can find those papers, and B, the problem with HPLC is, compared to the FoodSense, is HPLC is either expensive to own, or expensive to run, or expensive to use as a test system. It leads to what we call under-testing. How many samples will people send? People won't send every sample to the HPLC lab because it's too expensive. So it leads to a lot of under-testing, and the results can be slow. Even if you had this in-house, you may wait some time to get your actual results. It's a black box with no sense of error. So you've no, let's say, vision on what's really happening. You know, the sample goes off, you get a certificate of analysis back. People just take it as face value. And I'll talk about that in some slides as well. FoodSense is obviously much lower cost. It's also, just getting rid of something. It's much lower cost. It allows you to do a lot more testing, and it allows you to do much faster results. And it's also a transparent process, and I'll talk about the transparency of this process in a little bit. When I say a black box, at the moment, people really take their certificates of analysis from the provider of high performance liquid chromatography services. They take those values as at face value, that there's no questioning about what actually is going on here. But don't forget, this is a multi-step process. That, first of all, how do you know that the sample that you're sending to that laboratory is actually reflective of the entire batch? If you receive, 1 ton of chili powder, for example, a few grams of that chili powder is not necessarily representative of the entire bulk. So you have to do so. But people just assume that it is representative. So when it goes off for HPLC, it undergoes extraction, it undergoes dilution, it undergoes injection onto the column. And in fact, what the HPLC gives you is not Scoville heat units. It actually gives you obviously a chromatogram. Now that chromatogram then is then converted, the area under the curve or the peak height is then converted into concentration using a calibration graph. But when was that calibration actually done? So it's very much a black box from people. As soon as that powder leaves their hands, or that sample type leaves their hands, they don't see or witness any of this. So it's very much a black box. Something happens, you get the certificate back, people just take it as that must be right. So much work we've done actually where in fact we find out that the HPLC is not I'm very careful on this word, accuracy that they otherwise think. I mean, I know the difference between accuracy and precision, so I use those words carefully. So it's expensive, there's no transparency on it, and there's actually no sense of error on it. So, for example, if you send the same sample out to 3 different labs, you will get 3 different results. With those 3 different results, who is correct? That's what's going on a lot of the HPLC, let's say, labs, or it's testing. You may also send the same sample to the same lab on different occasions with different names. And if you send the same sample to the same lab on different occasions with different names, you'll get 3 different results back. So it's very, people sort of take the HPLC result or certificate as it must be accurate. But if you actually start to try and test different labs or even the same lab, you'll actually find out that actually the results are in different places. This is actually a good certificate of analysis, just something I found sort of online. I'd consider this a good certificate of analysis. I'm just laughing to myself slightly because I realised that I've had this certificate of analysis for some time, and I say it's good, and then I realise the date on this can't be possibly true, because this would suggest no, in fact, it is correct. So it's a good certificate of analysis. They got a picture of the product here. The product is very heterogeneous. Look at that product. So the capsaicin is not evenly distributed throughout throughout these dried chilies. This is not that. This is not that video, let's say. But I've got some dried chilies here. Well, they're semi-dried. The capsaicin if I sample this chili in different places, I'll actually find out that the capsaicin is not evenly distributed. I don't think I need to tell an expert audience like this that the hotness rather, is not in the chili seeds. It's actually in the ovaries. They say here that they use the AOAC 1995.03 method. They report the Scoville heat units, 11,636. This is a better one actually, because so many times we will get certificates of analysis or expectations from customers that will say, my Scoville heat unit is 2 million Scoville heat units, or my Scoville heat unit is 1.5 million Scoville heat units. Really, that precise, or that rounder number? At least with this, they've reported it as being 11,636, which is more, say, believable. There was a guy on YouTube I saw where he actually was sending them out for analysis, and his certificates of analysis were coming back at like 66,000 Scoville heat units. And I'm like thinking, really? Exactly 66,000 Scoville heat units? I was like, no, come on. So there's no, but there's what my biggest concern on this is that there's no uncertainty indicated. Every time you make a measurement, there is an error associated with it, but there is no uncertainty. You would in fact take this as 11,636, but the question is plus or minus what? Plus or minus 10%, 20%, 50%? There's always an error, especially when you're measuring natural products like this. If they took the same sample, did the whole process again, they would not get the same result. There's an error associated with it, but they don't report that. So we have HPLC. There's no indication of when the system was last calibrated. So you end up with people believing the results, but when you try and dive into the science behind these results, especially from HPLC. Now, the nice thing about the FoodSense Generation 4 actually is that you get to do the entire procedure yourself. You get a result on your phone and you get the raw data in the cloud. So suddenly the transparency is there. You can, if you make a mistake, you can see how that mistake will actually end up translating through to the final result. So it gives you a lot more ownership on actually the entire, let's say, on the process. So let me just go back to my screens. So we have compared against AOAC, AOAC 99.5.03. It's a small thing. ZP owns HPLC systems, so we do understand they're working. We understand the cost of them. We understand the complexity of these instruments. These instruments, you really do need, good, at least trained, experienced scientists to kind of run these kind of instruments. We do understand that, the methods that we come across a lot is ASTA 21.3, but it's really the same as the AOAC 99.5.03, and it's the same for there's an Indian Foods Administration, if I can say, they got a 24.0 method, and these are all really the same thing. So we have read them and watched them, let's say, change over the years, and we do understand that actually the three that I've mentioned are actually the same thing. Something I just want to say is that you do find people don't really understand these AOAC methods. That, for example, if the product contains oregano or thyme, you can't actually use the HPLC, the high performance liquid chromatography method. Just FYI. What else? Yeah, so just a way of background, I probably want to say that we're on the FoodSense Generation 4. If you want to understand its performance versus HPLC, using the AOAC method 99.5.03, I would rather that people look at the independent scientific literature from Charlie Rowe, and he's got 2 papers out there. I think he's a user, I know he's a user. We never sponsored him, we never gave him free material, he just bought it all himself and just got on with it, and I think he does it because he wants to support, as I say, chili pepper growers in the USA. The technology that we are using has actually come from the University of Oxford. It was licensed from them. It was a gentleman just retired called Professor Richard Compton, but he has actually just retired of recent. And we're doing what's called an electrochemical method. So I say here a quick demo. So I want to make the point, and as I make that point, but as I make the demo, I might compare against HPLC. The first thing I want to say is I'm doing if I look at this sample here, and I might just change the camera slightly to give you a slightly different perspective. If you look at this sample, you can see that this sample is in fact got some bits in it. So what I might do then is, I'm just going to do a quick vortex on this. That's something I wasn't really planning to do, but I just realized that it does actually have some bits in it. So I've got a vortexer here. Just vortex that up a bit. So I'm just trying to make sure that everything is homogeneous. So I'll just change cameras for a second. Right. So I've shaken this up quite vigorously. Now I'll change cameras again to here. I'm just going to put, so the reason I bring that up is because when you're doing HPLC, it's quite a long procedure, and that procedure can actually add error into it. The procedure here, the nice thing about using electrochemistry, which we use for the analysis, is that the procedure can be of sample prep can be much shorter. I've just put the sample on there. Let me just go to assay and start measurement, and off it goes. The reason being is that people's at the moment, if you want to measure something, you basically either have an internal lab, which there may probably be a bit of a backlog on. In fact, you have to kind of package this up, send it out. I've seen, easily seen it can take a month sometimes to get the results back. By the time the results get back, the product's probably already shipped. So it was probably a little bit of a could have been a little bit of a waste of time. And also, if the product is, I don't want to say deteriorating, but changing over time, you wouldn't know about it. So capsaicin is an organic molecule. It's not going to last forever. It's going to oxidize. So what I want to do now is I can see on my, how do I say this? I can see on my phone I've got a result. Let me just, change the camera to, this one. So I've got a result on my phone. I've got a result of 3,430 Scoville heat units. And it also says that the upload is complete. People don't like me, actually what I was testing was, just gonna grab it. Because it's so quick to make up a test on this, I was testing Tabasco sauce. If you Google Tabasco sauce, you'll see that we've hit right in where they expect the result to be. But this is the important bit. This is this transparency part. I'm just going to share my screen with you for a second. So this is the result. First of all, I can see who did the work. I can see the date at which they did it. I can see the time at which they did it. So traceability, who did it, what date did they do it, what time did they do it. It's traceable. I can then see the raw signal. Today, I am not going to explain the raw signal to you. That would be in one of our monthly webinars. So anyone's interested, come to that. But notice that actually I have the result saved. That was what was on my phone earlier on. It's the same result as here, sort of 34,000. It rounded it up, but 34,030, 34,025 there. And just notice that I can absolutely see what we call a fingerprint. So I mentioned a gentleman called Richard Compton, University of Oxford. He happens to be an electrochemist. The core technologies at Zimmer and Peacock are often electroanalytical sciences, and in the webinars we do actually explain this. But this is the receipts. You cannot get such a distinctive fingerprint. It's flipping capsaicin. And so the thing is, see, I'm able to sometimes show to people, they're like, oh, it's not as hot as I think it is. And you look at this, you say, but where's the capsaicin? Or in fact, you can have, you can end up with very massive signals, which tells us it's much hotter than people are thinking. So we have a great transparency, and we're able to show people not just a number. So all a certificate analysis from an HPLC test house will show you as a number. We can show you a number, and we can show you the supporting raw science, or the science behind where that actual number, let's say, really came from. So I think I just did that quick demonstration because it makes the points for me a little bit. These are definitely low cost versus HPLC. This is definitely a low cost instrument versus HPLC. The operational cost on this is nothing compared to HPLC. the ability to do rapid testing is orders of magnitude much faster than HPLC. So we're not trying to compare ourselves actually against HPLC. HPLC is its thing. But if there wasn't a problem, and as a, let's say somebody was distributing or reselling the FoodSense Generation 4, people wouldn't be interested in this instrument unless if there wasn't a problem with HPLC. But actually, they do perceive there's a problem with HPLC, and I suspect it's the cost and time is the biggest problem they have. This is lower cost and a much shorter time. If you want to compare against HPLC, then I would use the independent papers from Charlie Rower, which I will put in the link underneath this video when it's gone live. I just want to say thank you. If you've got any questions about FoodSense Generation 4, don't forget we do have a webinar on the 1st of August, I believe it is. But the link to the webinar, every time the webinar's happened, the link will still take you to the next webinar in the series, so you can then watch the live demonstrations there. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, thanks very much.